Oh, that's such a great question. I love answering that question. I mean, any developer advocate you talk to is going to have a different definition for what developer advocacy is and what developer relations is. Like, DevRel is the team. DevRel is the organization. DevRel is the mission. DevRel is the think tank behind it. To me, you're not a DevRel. There is no such thing as being a DevRel. You work on a DevRel team as a developer advocate or a community manager or a technical writer, right? All of those pieces make up a developer relations team. To me, developer advocacy, being a developer advocate, I had a definition for a long time, and then friends of mine, peers of mine, but they're also friends who are also DAs, Heather Downing and Guy Royce. We had a conversation at a conference last year about what does the term DA mean, and how do you bring that up in interviews if someone asks you what a developer advocate is or what you tell your organization, or even like in the interview process, right? I've always said developer advocacy is the bridge between, actually, Alyssa Nicol is also somebody who gave me part of a definition. I take definitions from everybody and I kind of make my own, right? But to me, my definition, Alyssa's, Guy, and Heather, I'm a bridge between the community as well as the product and the organization, right? So I am that middle person. I am the voice of the community. I'm the voice of the product or the organization. I'm the ambassador for the community, not just the company, but the community. Because it's in the name, developer relations. We're here to build relationships, right? It's always going to be about relationships. And my buddy Shar, who is really, really big in the DevRel space, works at Oracle. Actually, he's right down in DevNexus right now in Atlanta, Georgia. He put out a tweet, I think it was last year, he put out a tweet, and the tweet more or less said, we're in the business of developer relations. If you start caring too much about the technology, you are no longer in DevRel. You are in DevTech, and that is not our role. It's not DevTech. Our role is DevRel. So that's kind of like where I put it. Like I grab a bunch of different people's explanations as to what it is and kind of form my own. But the TLDR is I'm here for the community. I'm here to teach and mentor and help and be there for them when they need it.
My name is Schalk Neethling, and this is the Mechanical Ink. Podcast, a podcast about open source, the open web, sustainability, and those who want to make the web and the world a better place. Hey, Chris, and welcome to the Mechanical Ink. Podcast.
Hey, what's good? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a huge pleasure. Thanks for doing this. So I'm not going to do a big intro, as I always say. I'm going to leave it to you because nobody can introduce you better than you. So I'm going to just hand the mic over to you and tell us who is Chris DeMars, what are you up to, and what gets you excited about life and gets you out of the bed in the morning?
Oh, well, my name is Chris, so that's good. I'm pretty sure my name's still Chris. Senior developer advocate at DigitalOcean. Really stoked to be there. Still new to that role in that company. Not so much the SDA role, but DO in general. Tomorrow actually makes 2 months that I've been over at DO doing all the DevRel stuff. So really stoked on that. I'm from Metro Detroit area, Michigan born and raised. Love it. It's kind of chilly and rainy out right now, but that's all right. We're gonna push through. The weekend's almost here. Let's see what gets me out of bed. Let's see what. A lot of things get me out of bed. Usually it's to go to the bathroom. That gets me out of bed. But no, man, just working, doing community work. I love it. That's community is my lifeblood. I love all things community. And then, I mean, I do stuff outside of work too. It's not just all work. I paintball and I fish and I compete in tournaments in that front. I'm really big into the paranormal space. So UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, Bigfoot, Mothman, all that. So it's kind of me in a nutshell. And I'm heavily tattooed, but I can't draw to save my life.
That's a great introduction. Yeah, my daughter is also she found about Mothman at some point. I don't know, on YouTube, I'm assuming, and she's been obsessed ever since. So I have heard all the stories and seen all of the photos, and it looks super cool. Like that massive statue, it is so awesome. I don't know if you've ever been to it, but yeah, we've never been, obviously, but she would
I
love
want
to
to.
visit.
They every year they have the Mothman Festival, and it's usually, I think it's usually September 16th every year. I think. I mean, it might the date might change, but like it's usually on the 16th of September, and people come in from all over the place and take pictures with the Mothman statue and everything. It's in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and that's where the Mothman sighting in the fall of the Silver Bridge happened.
Yeah, fascinating, fascinating. So you've mentioned like other like community being a lifeblood, but then you mentioned like developer DevRel. I think a lot of people hear this term and sometimes developer advocate. I've seen you use that, for example. Um, but I'm not sure that even I am always 100% sure what that is. What does that mean? What does that entail? So perhaps if you can give the audience like a sense of what does it mean to be a dev role? What do you do? What is a day in the life?
Oh, that's such a great question. I love answering that question. I mean, any developer advocate you talk to is going to have a different definition for what developer advocacy is and what developer relations is. Like DevRel is the team. DevRel is the organization. DevRel is the mission. DevRel is the think tank behind it. To me, you're not a DevRel. There is no such thing as being a DevRel. You work on a DevRel team as a developer advocate or a community manager or a technical writer, right? All of those pieces make up a developer relations team. Uh, to me, developer advocacy, being a developer advocate, I had a definition for a long time, and then friends of mine, peers of mine, but they're also friends who are also DAs, Heather Downing and Guy Royce. We had a conversation at a conference last year about what does the term DA mean, and how do you like bring that up in interviews if someone asks you what a developer advocate is or what you tell your organization, or even like in the interview process, right? I've always said developer advocacy is the bridge between. Actually, Alyssa Nicol is also somebody who gave me part of a definition. I take definitions from everybody and I kind of make my own, right? But to me, my definition, Alyssa's, Guy, and Heather, I'm a bridge between the community as well as the product and the organization, right? So I am that middle person. I am the voice of the community. I'm the voice of the product or the organization. I'm the ambassador for the community, not just the company, but the community, because it's in the name developer relations. We're here to build relationships, right? It's always going to be about relationships. And my buddy Shar, who is really, really big in the DevRel space, works at Oracle. Actually, he's right down in DevNexus right now in Atlanta, Georgia. He put out a tweet. I think it was last year. He put out a tweet, and the tweet more or less said, "The second we're in the business of developer relations, if you start caring too much about the technology, you are no longer in DevRel. You are in Dev Tech, and that is not our role. It's not Dev Tech. Our role is DevRel." So that's kind of like where I put it. Like I grab a bunch of different people's explanations as to what it is and kind of form my own. Um, but the TLDR is I'm here for the community. I'm here to teach and mentor and help and be there for them when they need it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How does it differ from a community manager?
So I think a community manager is, I mean, a lot of it is the same, right? But I think a community manager, at least in my experience, is the person who has the pulse the most on community, because they're going through and they're putting the reports together and they're putting, they're tracking the metrics and they're running the tooling behind it, whether you are using Common Room or Orbit, right? They are the ones in the driver's seat pulling all this stuff together to help form out a strategy for DevRel, and bringing up conferences and meetups in different parts of the country, and working on sponsorships with those conferences and meetups, and working on sponsorships with other developer focused initiatives like virtual coffee or varying, different podcasts that are out there that are looking for sponsors. A community manager would, handle stuff like that. That's where I think the backbone of a team is your community manager. And I've seen it. I've worked on DevRel teams where there was a community manager and they handled, you might hear the birds chirping, they're not chirping, but the community manager handles all of that stuff. And it really takes the workload off of the DA who might be struggling or not struggling, but juggling all of these things on top of sponsorships and conferences and CFPs and all this other stuff, where the developer advocate can focus directly on that person or those people in the community, and the community manager can oversee those interactions. But it depends on who you talk to, right? A community manager might tell you something totally different. It's all very subjective, but to me, that's in my mind, that's what, in my eyes, that's what a community manager is, and it's an integral, very, very integral piece of the puzzle that makes the backbone of that DevRel team.
That's great. I love how you put all of that. That makes a heck of a lot of sense. Yeah, thanks so much for that. Now,
No problem.
jumping to something quite different. I saw this on your GitHub.
Oh,
You,
geez.
you have a super cool GitHub page, and one of the things that you just openly put there is your 2024 goals, and it's get this JS stuff under wraps. So far, failing. I would love to know more about that.
Oh, if you know me, you know I have a love-hate relationship with JavaScript. I've been a front-end developer for many, 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 many years. Before JavaScript was ever a thing, before CSS was ever a spec, I was writing code. I started off with QBasic at a young age, then transitioned over to HTML when we only had HTML. And I built a career as a front-end developer in the front-end space. I literally built a career, and a lot of people might call BS on this. A lot of people will say, oh, yeah, that's not possible anymore. Anything is possible. But when I was coming up in the game, I built a career on being a great semantic markup and CSS developer. You know what I mean? Like that was my specialty, and web accessibility. That was my specialty on the front end, right? I was tasked with creating front end architectures and best practices for companies on accessibility and CSS and flexible modular CSS architecture. There's a great book out there by Micah Godbolt, and it's still a great book. It's older, but it's a great book published on O'Reilly. It's called it's a front end architecture book, and it's amazing. It's a great book. To this day, it still holds up, and I love it. And there's the Atomic book by Brad Frost. Yes, it's an older book, but that book still holds up. And I always, kind of go to those because I've had people tell me all the way from developers to architects, there's no such thing as architecture on the front end. And I'll pull the book out and be like, BS. It's right here. I'm holding it. I own the book. You know what I mean? So I built a career around that. And I've never had to solely rely on JavaScript to do certain things I needed to do or around a career. Yes, I've had to do stuff in Angular here and there and React, and I know enough JS and various frameworks and libraries to be dangerous, but I'm not a JavaScript engineer. I have friends and that's all they do, and they love it. Whether it's Angular, Vue, Svelte, React, they love it, right? That's not me. And as much as I try to learn and try to do something here or there in JavaScript, I can work my way around it, but there's no way I'll ever be to the level that some of my friends are, where they can just build something from scratch in JavaScript. Like me, I'll just stare at VS Code the whole time trying to figure out how to do it. But nowadays with generative AI tooling, and you got Copilot and Tab9 and these different things out there, you can just tell the editor what you want it to do and it'll do it. And I think that's good learning too, because you can see it, right? And then you can start to kind of pick it up on how to do it. But I can put a React application together, no problem. I could put an Angular app, a Vue app together. But if you want to get into the big intricacies and start pulling in different APIs and do things externally, you're not paying your boy to do that. I'll tell you that right now. But I'm old school too. You know what I mean? I got that old school mentality. I'm an old school webhead. So for the young people listening, when you call yourself like an old head or an old school head, you're an older person that came up in the game, right? That's what an old head is. So yeah, I'm not new to this. You know what I mean? So Maybe
Hmm.
I'm a little curmudgeon-y. I like to do stuff in the old ways, but that's just the way it is. If you don't like it, kick rocks.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, and I think a lot of people just reach for the new stuff. But there's a ton of value in the old stuff still, and I think we're kind of moving back to that. I think some people have realized that we might have become too dependent on frameworks, and we might
Yep,
even have become too dependent on doing everything on the client. There's a
yep.
big resurgence in Python and Ruby on Rails and all these good things, saying that maybe you don't shouldn't do everything on the client. So, but I think it's good, right? That's what keeps this world interesting. Is like you push the boundaries a little bit in one direction, and then you find out that you pushed it too far, and then you kind of pull back and you learn. Like the remix you're talking about, like where you take different people's viewpoint on a specific role, and you're saying like I'm going to take a bit of that, bit of that, bit of that, bit of that, and we're going to make it my own. So I think that's what's happening in the web world, and that's exciting.
Yep. And to that point too, like all of these frameworks and libraries do not help the accessibility piece of any of this. You know what I mean? Like I was just listening to the episode that Hida and you did. I was listening to a little bit of that, and I met Hida last 2 years ago. We all spoke at a conference in London, England, and got to meet Hida, and they're super cool. And it was nice to hear somebody else besides myself and other accessibility people talk about the importance of markup and the importance of semantic HTML, and how they a lot of people may have lost that skill set of like creating semantic markup, because semantic markup is accessible, right? And that's where your accessibility issues come from. Like a lot of that low hanging fruit that we get in these accessibility audits is from badly structured markup, right? Like where did the disconnect happen? I think the disconnect happened with frameworks and libraries. If I'm being totally honest, you still have to bake in accessibility into them anyways. They don't come with accessibility out of the box. You know what I mean? You create a component in React, you still have to make that accessible. And how are you going to do that? Well, you need to do that with semantic markup first. Yeah, you're writing JSX, but it's going to compile down to HTML anyways. The JSX still has to be semantic because it's going to make it semantic HTML once it's compiled. So,
Yeah, no, I get it. I 100% agree. You've mentioned accessibility a couple of times now, and everywhere that I read about you, you brought that up, and so clearly this is something that's important to you. It's very near and dear to my heart as well. So I asked the same question of Hida when I spoke with him 2 days ago. So I'm gonna throw it at you as well. Why is accessibility important to you?
oh, that's a great question, and I answer that all the time, and even in my conference talks that I give, like I have a slide dedicated to my why. Now, when I was, I keep talking about when I came up in the day. Accessibility wasn't a thing back in the day. Like we didn't have semantic markup. Like yes, there was markup that was semantic, but like new HTML5 spec wasn't a thing in 95, 1996. And if you were to read books about, building web pages with HTML 4.0 or whatever XHTML, there was no section of books that talked about accessibility, at least that I remember. Yes, there was, there was pieces about alt attributes with your images. Okay, that's cool. Was that for an accessibility reason? It was never marketed as an accessibility thing. It was just like, hey, if your image is broke, make sure you have this in place. It had nothing to really to do at that time with accessibility. We all know that tables are accessible. Now, if we're using back in the day, we used tables to lay out a web page. That was not accessible, right? We weren't using it for tabular data at the time. I mean, some yes, but sometimes mostly it was for building out a website. And spacer GIFs with Photoshop when you're in Photoshop and you're slicing your PaintShop Pro or Corel, whatever the case may be. We used tables before we had sections and asides and divs, and um, that's kind of what springboarded me into it. Years ago, I saw a talk by Marcy Sutton it was probably at a JS Conf, and Marcy was talking about, I forgot what it was, but it was one of their many accessibility talks, and it kind of put a light bulb off in my head. I'm like, oh shit! Like nobody that I know of is talking about accessibility Marcy's the only one I see right now. There were other people, but I kind of stuck with her. I stuck with Marcy because she always had something coming out. Always. There was always a new JS comp here or a CSS comp or anything. So I was like, I'm going to stick with Marcy and watch her journey. So I got a hold of Marcy. I think it's probably on Twitter. Her and I started talking, and then we became friends. Um, we became good friends. When she used to come to Michigan when she worked at DQ, I would pick her up from the airport, or her and her coworkers, and take them to Ann Arbor and drop them off by the offices in their hotel. And her and I would hang out, and she'd come over, and we'd just bounce around the city. And she was the one that kind of kicked me, like kind of lit that fire and said, "Hey, Chris, you if you're passionate about this, which you seem like you really care, start being a voice for the community." And that's kind of where I kicked it off for me. And then as I've gotten older, I have medical disabilities. My mom's my biggest cheerleader, but she still uses a flip phone. She doesn't have a computer. She comes from the days of the typewriter, right? She's a boomer. So she'll be, I think, 69 or 70 this year, or 68. She'll be 68 because we're 30 years apart, me and my mom. And I just turned 38 in March. She's my big why, right? My mom has 4 out of the 5 main different types of impairments that we need to be thinking about, right? She has visual and hearing and cognitive and mobility disabilities, all 4. And on top of the mental health, too. And mental health is a huge thing that's very, very much overlooked when it comes to accessibility. If I can make an accessible user experience for my mom at the end of the day, I've done my job as a developer. I've done my job as a worker on the web, right? That's my why. That's why I care so much. But then everybody else too, right? Everybody that's in my audience, like I bring up a lot of times, like I'll have a bunch of people in my audience using assistive technology, and I'll ask them, "Do you know right now that you're using assistive technology?" And they'll look at me like, "What do you mean? I don't have a computer in front of me or anything like that." And I'm like, 6 of you have glasses on, and a handful of others might be wearing contacts. People think too many times that assistive technology just means digital. Technology is a means to do something that was no longer provided in the first place. Like that's probably not the official definition. But technology does not have to be digital, right? Someone couldn't see, and then glasses were made, right? This is technology, and it's often overlooked. And once I make that point, those light bulbs go off, and they're like, "Oh shit, okay, now I see. Wow, yeah, I really do rely on these glasses or these contacts to do my job or to live life. And if I didn't have these, then I'd be SOL, or I could be SOL." So my mom is my why, pretty much. And then, everybody else, I just want to make the world a better place and make the web a better place. Another thing that, a lot of people don't think about either is, we're changing lives. We don't always think about that. You know what I mean? Like the software that you build might save someone's life in a hospital. The software you build might help a child read. But you're not thinking that. You're thinking in ones and zeros, and you're thinking in technology, right? You're thinking about a paycheck. You're not thinking about the people that are consuming that software that you're building and you're shipping that might change their life, right? A lot of people don't think about that, at least not in my experience. And that's another thing where the light bulb goes off and the jaws drop. It's like, oh shit, Chris is right. Like, I really need to start caring about these things because if I don't, it's not good. And I always say, if you don't care about these things, you might want to look for another job. So, I mean, let's be real. Like, I'm not here to beat around the bush. I've never been one to beat around the bush. I'll tell you how it is. You don't like it, you don't think that this makes a difference, maybe it's time to find another job where you can go stock some shelves or flip some burgers or do something that's really not going to, have that life-changing impact, because I'm very literal when I say it. It's great to know that we're changing lives and that we have so much power, just us and our hands and our whatever we're using, keyboard, mouse, etc. So
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing all of that. Gonna take me a moment to continue here. That's really well said.
I appreciate the love. I know I went off on a lot of that, but I mean it's no different than if I was talking to you in a conference. If you were in my audience, I'd be saying the same exact thing. So I'm not, one person in an audience giving a talk and one person on a podcast. I'm gonna be the same person across all different mediums. So
Yeah, that's beautiful. We need more of that. We need more people that's just real all the time, no matter where you are
yeah.
and with whom you're talking. Um, So I think one of the things you said is the fact that the stuff we make, I talk about that quite a lot. The things we make can enable or exclude somebody, right? I think one of the powers of technology and of the web is that it can make the lives of so many people easier. And I sometimes feel that it's failed in that sense because I still see people having to do things they really shouldn't need to do, put themselves in very uncomfortable, sometimes literally painful situations because the technology that could save them from having to do that is not accessible to them, or it's too complicated and they're not sure how to use it. And because they're human like all of us, they're too shy to say, I don't understand. Because there's this thing about, oh, so you're stupid. It's like, come on, people, let's grow up a bit here. Um, and I think one of those areas where we probably don't think about this, but where it's very true, is open source. Because you are building something that you have no idea where this will end up, especially when it gets really big, right?
Yep.
Some of these like huge libraries, like the entirety of the internet relies on some of these things. If those things, I mean, we've seen it in the last 2 weeks, right? Um, now, a couple of questions there. Like, how does developer advocacy change when it comes to open source? Is it the same thing? Do you approach it from a different angle?
I think it stays the same, right? Um, essentially you do have to approach it from a different angle too, because open source is one of those things where a dedicated you need dedicated resources to work on open source, right? And I don't mean resources in a bad way. I'm talking about like a team, right? I don't like looking at people as resources. So maybe resources wasn't the best word to use, but you need people, right? And I think that's where a lot of companies fail. A lot of companies say they care about open source and they have tools out there that are open source, yet they don't give their engineering teams time to work on that open source or to review those issues or to, review a PR and merge a PR, right? I've been at companies like that where, oh yeah, we're gung ho on open source. Okay, sweet. Well, let's participate in Hacktoberfest. Well, wait a minute. Let's pump the brakes. Well, what do you mean pump the brakes? We have open source tools, correct? If the open source tooling is publicly available and we have it out there for people to use and or submit issues in PRs, then why wouldn't we participate in Hacktoberfest? Oh well, we don't really know if we're really open source. Okay, then mark the repos as private or intersource it. There is no one or the other. It's either you are or you aren't. If you're going to dedicate the time, great. If you're not, pull that stuff back, intersource it, or make the repo private and don't make it public. It's clear. It's clear as day right there, right? You need a team behind those initiatives. Now, if it's just open source and it's just everybody, then you can advocate as much as you want, you know, either way, because you're not getting paid to do the advocacy, right? If it's just a tool that somebody made, like years ago, I made a, a gulp config. I love gulp. I would choose gulp over grunt any day, even over Webpack. I still love gulp, but I made a gulp config years ago, and I called it Bulp, BULP, for instance, for basic gulp, and I made a web page. I made stickers. I handed out stickers at conferences. Like to this day, I'll still see the sticker on people's machines. Like every now and then, I'll see one. But like a buddy of mine still uses it for his gulp configuration at his organization because they don't use Grunt. They don't use Webpack. They're still using older technology, right? So he uses the open source tool I made, and it's just me. I didn't get paid for that, right? So I don't need a developer advocate to do anything. Anybody that's using it can advocate for it, right? So it's different in that sense. But like, if your company has an open source tool, or there's tooling out there, um, you need to be able to dedicate a little bit of time as well with any other team that's helping out with open source initiatives to that open source initiative as well. Whether that's working with the team to review PRs, or letting people know that you have the open source tools out there at conferences or write about them. But all in all, it's if it's there, there's really not much of a difference because you're still doing the community work as it is. It just adds another piece to it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I agree with what you say about the fact that if you're going to do open source, do open source. Don't half-ass it, like I've seen that many times, and then I'm like, but if you're not going to commit to this thing, then maybe you shouldn't open source it. And then there's some people
100%.
that do yeah, and there's some people that do the thing where they're like, the code is open source and you can raise issues, but we don't accept pull requests. And I'm like,
Defeats the
interest,
purpose. It
interesting.
defeats the purpose. Don't
That's
do it then. Like I
yeah, and for me, like for me, open source is not about the code; it's about the people. And so, if you are excluding people from contributing, then I don't know if it's open source anymore. The code is
exactly.
available; you can read it for academic purposes, but it's not a collaborative project anymore. And I don't know if, to me, collaboration is kind of core to open source. So if you take that part away, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to be part of it really. It's not for me, sorry, but yeah.
No, it's not fun at that point either. You know, open source is supposed to be fun, right? There's a reason we have Hacktoberfest. You know what I mean? There's a reason that people do have like open source parties, and open source is talked about at conferences and written about because it's fun. It's fun to give back. You know what I mean? Especially if it's something awesome. Like I know NASA, like open sources some of their code, right? And people can say, "Oh, I have code that is making the Mars rover work." Like how badass is that? You know what I mean? Like that's high level. That's cool. I worked at a
Yeah.
company where we had an open source design system, and it was open source, right? It was, and I worked with the team, the design system team, as a DA to get it up on Hacktoberfest, and we opened it up for contributions and got contributions from all over the place, and had a great time doing that. Right? Like that is the stuff that's cool. Like don't open source your SDK and then turn around and say, oh well, it's half open source. No, you can't half open source it. You either fully or you don't.
Yeah. And I think we saw some of that with the AI stuff early on, right? Where it was like, it's open source, but you can't use it in this, that, and the other. It's like, that's not open source. Go look at at the open source definition. That's like one of the things you cannot do. You cannot restrict how this is used. You can't like put a competition clause in there and say it's still open source. Sorry,
Yeah,
try again.
right.
You've mentioned you've mentioned Oktoberfest a couple of times there, and I was going to ask you a yup nope about it, but to me it's clear that you're a yup, and so the reason why I brought this up, uh, I am and I always was a fan because I loved what the idea behind it is, but I do see that for maintainers, and at some point it did lose some of its meaning because people gamed the system to get t-shirts. Um, and for me, getting a Hacktober t-shirt and wearing it was a sense, it gave me a sense of pride because I felt like I earned this, right? I did real work, and for that I got recognition, and I have this thing I can put on. And it has a cool logo on it, and I love supporting it. It's not something I just wanted. It wasn't about the shirt. The shirt was just, it's kind of like Sentry turning around and saying, we're not giving money to the open source maintainers because now we want them to do our bidding. We're giving them money because we've already received value from the work they've done. We just want to say thank you in a monetary way because we know it's meaningful to them. So the same thing is how I saw the t-shirt, right? It's like, I've already done the work. This is just something to say thanks. But some people, just adding your name to 5 repositories and calling that like, that's not open source contribution. That's not why Oktoberfest started. So I get why it got ugly and why maintainers was like, ugh, stop this. We're getting overwhelmed with junk. But then DigitalOcean turned around and said, we hear you. And they've done a heck of a lot. And I think the last 2 Oktoberfest were seriously cool. And I think they have put a lot of work on themselves to make sure this thing is good. Now that you're at DigitalOcean, what is your hopes? Maybe I'm going to change this question. What is your hope for Hacktoberfest in 2024?
That's a great question. I used to participate in Hacktoberfest for years. I think Even in the early days when it started, I was participating in Hacktoberfest because I too wanted the shirt, and I used that as like it was a reward, right? It was like, hey, listen, I did something cool and I got this sweet shirt. Now I really don't wear tech shirts anymore or anything like that. I don't wear them even at conferences unless I'm looking for an organization. But like the shirt, I like the stickers. Like I sticker up every MacBook I have. The stickers were cool. The shirts were awesome. Even when Microsoft, I don't know if Microsoft does it anymore, but Microsoft, what, I think it might have been a few years ago, maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago. They also got into Hacktoberfest too. So even if you submitted the 4 or 5 PRs, I think back in the day it was 4 PRs on GitHub. But if you submitted 4 or 5 and you also submitted a PR to Docs for Microsoft, you got a different package. You get a separate package from Microsoft with like a plushie and like a Microsoft Hacktoberfest shirt specific and stickers. So that was cool that Microsoft got involved like that. I participated in Hacktoberfest last year a little bit. I didn't get all my PRs in because another thing that maintainers are doing now too that I saw is they're restricting community contributions to one PR and one PR only. Am I a fan of that? Absolutely not. Because as an open source contributor, I'm going to fix or add one thing and submit a PR for that thing. If I see something else, I'm going to submit a separate fix and separate PR for that to fix that thing. If I'm getting restricted and I can only do one for that repo, well, now there's no point in me contributing to this. Because, yeah, you might be able to get all 4 or 5 with one repo. And as long as it's, justified, I don't see the problem with it. Right? If not, you're just going to make a bunch of fixes, a bunch of commits in one big old PR, right? I'm not a fan of doing things like that. I like keeping things separate because it's easier to, tag stuff and make it more organizational, especially if you are doing like a release and then you can see each PR with a PR title and a conventional commit style. And you can say, okay, well, yes, this PR, oh, or we could probably pull this PR out, but, et cetera, et cetera. So I only got one in last year, which was a bummer. But I am all for it. Like this will be my first year. This will be my first year of Hacktoberfest while working at Dio, which is cool because Dio started this. I can only see it going up, right? I can only see it going up. I can only see amazing things happening. I'm glad all the restrictions were put in place a few years ago. I think that really made things a lot better. So you kind of got rid of the spammers and the bots and all this other stuff, like putting a space and then bringing and like tabbing back to get the space removed. Well, that's not cool. Like that's not cool. Like, oh, hey, I'm going to add 2 periods to the end of the sentence because there was 2 periods. And I'm going to delete one of them. No, that's BS. Sorry, it's not how that should work. If it's validated and it's tangible, do it. And do more than 4 or 5 PRs, right? Get your limit and then keep going because you might fall in love with open source. That's why there's websites that exist like My First PR and the stuff Virtual Coffee is doing with Hacktoberfest and PRs and Becca and the open source team, like they open their stuff up for Hacktoberfest. I think it's great. I think it's great as long as we do it the right way, we're going to be able to benefit the right way.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Hacktoberfest was, right? It was this idea that it's a month-long celebration of open source.
Yep.
That's what it was
Yep.
called. And the idea was that, hey, if you've never tried this thing, we're going to go out of our way to make it easy for you. And if you like this, keep going because it's
Yeah.
awesome and we want to share the awesome. So I think,
Yep.
and it's sad that was lost, but I'm glad that it's back and I'm looking forward to seeing what's happening this year.
Yeah. I like what you just said. Share the awesome. We need to make a sticker called Share the Awesome. Hashtag Share the Awesome. I love that. I love that. I don't know
Yeah.
if that sticker exists. We're trademarking it right now on this podcast. That is
Boom.
our sticker.
Nice. Nice. Sweet. Another project that's under Dio now, has been for a while, is CSS Tricks. Used to be the
Sure.
domain of Mr. Chris Coyer. There's been, much like Hacktoberfest, there's been a bit of a up and down around that. Like some people were not happy when Chris sold it. He had his reasons for it. He's explained it. He doesn't have to explain himself, but he did. And there's in recent times been some blowback against it. He's also released a blog post about it. But then I saw that DigitalOcean is there's a position open to become the editor for CSS Tricks, which to me signals that DigitalOcean is serious about this thing. It's not something they purchased for the SEO purely. It's something that they're getting behind, and they're seeing. And I'm guessing, like Hacktoberfest, they're seeing the talk on the street, and they're like, we got to do something about this. We got to set this right. So I don't know how, like you said, you're only 2 months a DO, so don't expect you to know all of the things, but what is your feelings? Maybe even it's personal. What is your hopes or feelings for CSS Tricks at DigitalOcean?
Yeah, I love CSS Tricks. I've been a fan of CSS Tricks since the early days. Even when I was a front end developer for the years prior to even discovering CSS Tricks and Chris Coyier and all of that whole entire platform, I've been a fan forever. And if I had to put money on it, I would say a lot of the up and coming front end developers today or that got into the game, in the mid 2000s or early 2000s. Well, yeah, let's say late to mid 2000s. Owe their career to CSS Tricks, or if you're a WordPress developer, you owe your career to CSS Tricks or PHP, right? That was where you started. The early days of WordPress and CSS and Chris was doing all the videos back in the day and writing all the stuff back in the day. There's a big push for community at DO. It is a top priority. And we revived CSS Tricks. I'm writing, every week we're getting a post out. I'm writing for, and I'm hoping that we can get some other writers in. We do have the site editor position open right now. I'm pretty sure we're still interviewing for that. And I can give you the link to that, or you probably already have it. But yeah, no, there's a big shift to community, and DO is very much about community, has always been about community. So I can only see it going up. I can only see it pushing and going forward and doing great things, not just for CSS Tricks, but for DO in general. You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. And it's, our CEO put out a whole tweet thread about it, and it's his top priority. He
Nice.
really cares about not just the DO community, but the CSS Tricks community, just the developer community, right? And that's great to see. That's great to hear. I trust him. I trust the mission. I trust the vision, and I'm here for the journey. And we're just going to rock and roll with it, and make things happen, and make community happy, and be the ambassador to our community as we need to be.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I'm glad you're there to take to take care of this. Feels good. AI 2024. We can't have a conversation without talking about AI. Love it or hate it.
I love it.
It's here to
Skynet.
stay.
Here comes Skynet. Here we go.
So responsible. I'm just going to throw some things like responsible use, the planet, people. How do all these things relate to AI? How do we do this? I mean, for me, maybe I can throw some of my own thoughts in here. I've talked about it too much. I should probably shut up, but let me say some things. So I think it's an inevitability. Like AI was always going to happen. Like that's like from back in Turing's day. This thing has been talked about. Machines, and it's in science fiction, and it's everywhere. It's like it's inevitable that it was going to be here. Now, my only concern is, are we doing it in the most responsible way we could have? No. Have some companies and people backtracked a little bit and learned from just going gung-ho with this? Yeah, it looks like it. Has open source made a massive impact? Yes, and I'm very glad about that, because one of my biggest concerns was that we were creating a new digital divide where you have those who have access to AI and everybody else. And you're going to see these people flourish and grow and do great things, and everybody else is going to suffer. We saw that with the early internet, where large portions of the world was left behind in the dust because they didn't have access to the internet, because of failed infrastructure, governments, all this kind of stuff. So I think open source is kind of leveling the field. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, because a lot of these things on the open source world lacks the user experience aspect that a lot of these companies are investing in. So you're kind of left on your own to figure it out. And a lot of them puts it on you to run it on your machine. And even me with a MacBook Air with an M2 chip in it and like 8 gigs of RAM, if I run Whisper, I'm taking a coffee break because nothing else is going to run. So expecting somebody in Africa with a like decent-ish Windows laptop to run a LLM on their machine is just, it's not going to happen. So with all of that said, like, what are your thoughts around AI and just where it is, some of the crazy stuff that goes on where people say developers are not going to exist in 5 years?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it?
I think AI is cool. Like I have friends that are in the AI ML space and they're doing like a lot of cool stuff, right? And it's not malicious, it's funny, or it's very useful. And I mean, there's useful stuff that we have right now, like Chat GPT. Like I have a background as a writer, and I've always been a great writer. But if I can write something and give it to Chat GPT and make it, put a different spin on it or make it sound more professional or anything like that, right? I think that's good. Copilot and Tab9 and Cody and all of those, source code generators. I think that's good, right? We were talking about that earlier. I think at some point, and I hope it doesn't happen, and AI is not going to take our jobs. You need people to do these things. You have to. Somebody's got to do it. AI is not going to be able to do everything. It's just not going to happen. And AI is just one of those things, like blockchain was, or those NFTs. Like it was huge at one point, right? But this all might come crashing down in 6 months. AI, right? The AI bubble might pop. But if it doesn't and it sticks around, I don't think AI is going to take our jobs. I don't think Skynet's going to happen, right? But I do think, thinking about it, I do think there might be some type of guidelines, principles, or laws in place to say, hey, listen, if this is what you're going to do or your organization is going to do this, you are restricted from doing any type of malicious activity with it, you know, along those lines of, an online like AI, artificial intelligence ordinance policy. That's a global thing, right? Because could someone start Skynet? Sure. Of course they can. Hackers can do crazy, crazy stuff. I mean, we've seen it. We have seen it. The last thing you want to do is piss off the wrong person that has a lot of power in their fingers to type on a keyboard that knows just a little bit more than your defense department knows to do the worst, right? I don't want it to get that way. I don't think it'll get that way, but we always got to be future thinking. We always got to be future friendly and thinking, what's going to happen. Could it happen? Yes. Should there be policies and procedures and laws in place to restrict that? Maybe. Will it get that way? Maybe. But I think for right now we're okay as long as we just maintain responsible usage of AI products or AI tooling. I think we'll be okay because it is benefiting people. You know what I mean? There's my buddy Guy Royce just told me about a tool called Writer.ai that helps with writing things if you can't find the voice for it. Like I was saying, the code generation tools, Chat GPT, even like the generative image stuff is it's okay, but then you got the whole the argument of, oh, it's stealing other people's work and then just making an amalgamation of something else. I can see how that could be a problem, and I don't use it either. But I mean, I could see both sides of the coin. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I think as long as it's used responsibly, smartly, even a word. If it's used smartly, I'll just say it smartly. #smartly. Then I think it's okay. I think it's okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's, and I think thankfully, there are enough foundations, open source, like nonprofit folks who are spearheading this. I think the Mozilla Foundation is doing quite a bit to to put some brakes on it and talk about the things that we need to talk about. The EFF, of course, they're doing their part. So I think there's a lot of voices that is saying the right things. The humane tech, they're also talking about. They've been quiet for a while though, which concerns me a little bit. But um, yeah, but there's a lot going on, and I think Europe is doing their usual thing, right, where they're like jumping ahead with legislation. And I know the folks at the OSI, the Open Source Initiative, they are working hard on a proper AI definition, especially in the open source thing. So I think it's great. I think it's like with a lot of stuff in tech. For example, diversity and all that kind of stuff. We know it's a problem, but as long as we're talking about it and we're admitting that it's a problem and we're taking steps to improve it, we're on the right track. When we just stand back and say, throw my hands up in the air, I don't know what the hell to do, then things go south very quickly.
Yep. Yeah. Once you identify that there is a problem that needs to be fixed, that's the first step. Like admitting you have a problem. You know what I mean? Like if you go back to, choose your version of whatever anonymous. But I've been in situations where I've been present at like Alcoholic Anonymous meetings, not for me, but to support other people in my family or friends, and I've gone with them to support them. That's the first step of that 12-step process, is admitting you have a problem, right? If we admit it, that we're coming to terms with it, for one. And if there is a problem that we are admitting, there has to be a follow up and a solution, right? Or you're not going to admit that you have a problem if you're not going to follow up with it, right? So I think taking that first step is a crucial piece of that.
Yeah, for sure. And to continue on that analogy, with this one, just hopefully we don't have to hit rock bottom before we admit we have a problem.
Oh yeah, because we've seen that too many times, eh?
Yeah, I think we're kind of there with the whole climate crisis, but that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, we can talk about that too later.
Yeah. What makes for a good leader?
Oh, what makes for a good leader? Caring, caring about your people, like that makes a good leader. That like it's not always about work. And I just there was a post on LinkedIn. I just commented on it and reposted yesterday. It was about one-on-ones. It was a breakdown of how a one-on-one should work and what to expect in a one-on-one. You might have seen me repost it. I've worked at organizations where currently or in the past where I've had one-on-ones with leadership, and one-on-ones with leadership scare the hell out of me. They do. They scared the living hell out of me because I'm always worried something bad's going to happen. And that's baggage from other companies where that's just the way it is. Like I've broken down in a one-on-one before because it just got too intense for me. And that was years and years ago, but that still sticks with me. But I've had leaders both present and in the past where the one-on-one was not about work. The one-on-one was about you as a person in life. I had a one-on-one one time with a skip years ago, and they said, Chris, I don't care about work. If I need to know what's going on, I'll ask your leader. I don't care. I want to know about you. How are you doing? How are you feeling? What's going on in your life? What do you got coming up? What other hobbies are you taking part in? Right? That shows me you care as a leader. Because if all you care about, in my opinion, is work, 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 we are just another cog in the wheel. And that's just me being real about it, right? If I'm talking with anybody, I always ask, how are you doing first? You know what I mean? I want to know how you're doing. How are you feeling? Right? Is everything okay? I care about you more as a person than I do about the work. The work will be there. You know what I mean? I can find out about what work's being done. If your leader can find about what work's being done, that's the reason you have team meetings and stand-ups, and you know what I mean? A one-on-one should be a time to connect, not a time to, delegate and talk about work. I think to me that's what makes a great leader, and a leader who can absorb the shit. You know what I mean? You're not there to have to worry about what's coming down from high. They're supposed to be the umbrella for you and your team, right? They handle the shit, not you. If you have a leader that can do that, that makes a great leader in my mind. And knowing what matters the most to you as the person, right? If you really care about like thing A, they really need to advocate for you when it comes to doing thing A. If someone else on the team loves thing B, right, they need to switch and, when they have those conversations with that person, advocate for them doing thing B, right? Because we're all different. We all have different specialties. We all do different things. We all shine in different areas. They need to highlight that, right? Per person, how it, makes the whole team cohesive, not just, oh, is the work getting done? That's not how you run a team. At least in all the years I've been doing this and all of the one-on-ones I've had, and I've never been a team lead, right? I do consider myself a leader, but I've never been a team lead unless it's just me on the team building out a program, which I've done before. That's to me, that's what makes a great leader.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I 100% agree with that. I think for me, one of the best experiences I had with that, and I think it's an extreme case, but where my manager told me, you should probably be looking for something at another company because you've reached the ceiling here. There's nowhere up for you from here. And I was like, oh, what? Like you wouldn't expect somebody to literally tell you to go find a different job at another place. It's like, maybe if you were doing a crap job, maybe, sure, but not if you're
Right.
doing a really good job. Like,
Yeah.
but he was like, I
I've
know.
had that too.
Yeah, and it's rare, but that is, that is like, come on, that's the true shit right there. It's like,
Yeah.
I know you want more from your life and from your career, and you've reached the pinnacle here. You need to move on.
Yep. I've had someone, a senior in a one-on-one, say, "We hired you for the wrong thing because you are 20 steps ahead of this, and we are not going to be able to catch up. We don't think we hired for the right thing." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, you're overqualified for this role, and that's our bad for hiring the wrong thing." So like then that's cool to hear, right? But then you're also stuck in the position too, like you were saying, where okay, well now what? Like now I got to find a new job because I am too, we're too good for the. I like trying to be humble, but we're too good for the role that we were hired for, right? And that might be scary to people. Knowledge is power, yes, but having power can also be scary to other people who don't fully understand, especially at a higher level, don't understand what is going on, even though you are supposed to report to that person or have one-on-ones with that person. Like they might not have fully understood what's going on, and you're just leaps and bounds ahead of everything else. It's like, whoa, wait a minute here. We screwed up.
Yeah, but I mean, it takes humility to be able to admit that you messed up, right?
100%. 100%. Yep.
Most people don't want to admit
Yeah.
that. They'd rather
No, it takes a
shift
lot of
blame.
courage. Yep.
Yeah, for
Yep.
sure.
And that happens a lot. And that happens a lot in our world.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of blame
Mm-hmm.
shifting. But I'll be the first one to tell you if I screwed up, I screwed up. I'll tell you I screwed up. I'm that's just being real, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, for sure. And I think another scary thing is finding a job today in tech.
Oh, that is, yes.
You were in this position not too long ago, right?
Yep. Yeah. I had 2 layoffs in 1 year.
Ouch. Ouch.
Whoa.
That's rough, man. Any advice for people sitting in that position and looking for a job?
Just keep plugging away. Just keep plugging away. Your job is to find a job, right? There is none of this. I'm going to take a week or 2 off to recompose myself. No. Like you're not there to you just got laid off from a job, right? You may or may not have gotten a severance, right? For me, I have a single income. It's just me, right? I'm not married. I don't share the income with my girlfriend. It's just me. And some people, they might be married, etc. But like I've gotten laid off where I've gotten severance. I've gotten laid off where I didn't get a severance. So all I had was what was in my bank account, and I had to make it last. But if I'm making it last, it don't mean I'm taking a 2-week break to decompress. No, the second I'm laid off, I'm right on the computer trying to find a job. I'm applying to 100, 200, 300 jobs. You know what I mean? Anything I can get my hands on that's a DA role in some capacity, I'm applying. I don't have time to take a 2 week decompression session or a week, maybe take a day. Take a day, think about what just happened, and then hit the grind. Start grinding and hustling. That might I don't know if that's just a personal thing for me, or a Michigan thing, or a Detroit thing. But we have a saying here in Detroit, in Metro Detroit, and it's Detroit hustles harder, and it's a clothing company too. We got to hustle. I was raised to be a hustler. I have to find a job. My job is to find a job. I'm going to try my hardest to find a job, and if that means applying to 20 gigs in a day, taking 3 interviews at 4 in the morning, 6 in the morning, and 1 p.m. all the way into the evening, I got to do what I got to do. But I cannot afford not to be working. So you can take everything I say with a grain of salt, but your job is to find a job and just keep plugging away, build your network up through Twitter or LinkedIn, talk to people. That is the advice I could give to somebody. Just don't, it's going to suck. It's going to suck. And you're going to wish it never happened to you. And you might not even see a reason as to why it happened. Chances are you're not the reason you got laid off in the first place. But take whatever time you need, but just plug away and hustle and grind and try and find that next gig.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think there's very few people today that has the time to not be working. I think most people
Right.
today are living paycheck to paycheck. Some people don't even realize that. I didn't realize that, to be completely transparent. Like 7-8 months ago, I left Mozilla to do my own thing. Didn't quite work out, and I very quickly realized how paycheck to paycheck I was living. When as soon as that freelance gig dried up, almost immediately we were in trouble. So,
Right.
I could not afford to not be working. And I had to quickly make a plan because, I have people who depend on me. Like I have a wife and kids and stuff. So,
Right.
that just compounds everything. But it doesn't take it away, even if it's just you, you still want to take care of you. And you have people you care about that you would like to help out if they say, like, I'm having a tough time. So I think it's great advice. Just I spoke to somebody yesterday or 2 days ago, and I said the same thing, like take 10, 15 minutes and just feel the suck and just feel sorry for yourself and for your situation. And then say, okay, cool. What do I control in this situation? And play to the things you control and just keep going.
Yep. Yeah. And the only thing you can control is putting out resumes and filling out applications. Like you can't control the layoff, right? Once you lose access to your computer, there's no going back, right? Even if you were to email or talk to somebody, it's not going to matter because the decision probably came from somebody else, right? Take that time and only control the things that you can control. And that is redoing your resume, networking, and then putting yourself out there as much as you can.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. The future of the web, what are you excited about? What's coming up that's landed or that's going to land? But it doesn't even have to be like programming or anything. It can just be like,
Yeah.
I don't know, anything on the web.
I wish we would just go back to the good old days of the web, 1996, 97, when we had guest books and web rings and counters and frames and tables and animated GIFs. And that's when the web was great. You know what I mean? That's the web I came up in. That's the web I love. And that's what I'm excited for. If we if we experience a renaissance, that'd be fun. On the realness, um, on the real, I would say just all like the cool stuff you can do in CSS, vanilla CSS. Not frameworks and libraries. I'm talking just straight up CSS. The cool stuff that you can do in CSS that we've been able to do for a couple years now. I've given talks about, but all the other cool stuff that's coming up. Just to see where we're going in the accessibility space. It's been brought up to my attention a few times on like the accessibility in the use of like Oculus and Vision Pro and how that's going to work, right? And I would assume that if you're viewing a web page or a website, in Vision Pro, if the website is already built with accessibility principles and accessibility standards, that same website is going to be accessible in a Vision Pro too, right? But what about all the other stuff, right? Like, what about like apps and stuff that I don't even know how to use a Vision Pro, but like just from the screenshots, right? Like the same apps and stuff and settings you would use on a MacBook Pro or an iPhone, right? You see that in the Vision Pro, right? So if that stuff has to be accessible, how's it going to be accessible in like that space, right? That spatial area, I think would be the term. So I would like to, see how things go there.
Yeah, that stuff is exciting. It's a new paradigm. It's going to take a while for that to settle down. I think Apple took a big gamble, and they're big enough to be able to take gambles like this. It looks interesting. At this point, it's beyond the average person's reach as a toy. Even it's like it's the price of a car almost. So, but there's other ones that's not as expensive. They're still expensive, but not as expensive. But I think it's spatial computing is probably where we like it's going to have a room. It's going to take over a part of our lives to some extent. Hopefully not too much. I think it's like AI. Hopefully not too much that we don't lose the humanity and we just become people interacting in virtual space with computers. So, but yeah, I mean, I dig the idea of the web of the old web, but Anil Dash seems to think we're going back there. And the indie web is sure as heck like pumping. So there's some of this happening, decentralization, all that good stuff. So I think it's like Portland's thing is like keep Portland weird. Like I'd love us to keep the
Yep.
web weird, right?
That's what I'm saying. Like, keep your web weird, keep it funky, right? Like, if you were to talk to my buddy in the paranormal space, he's a friend of mine, and he always I go to a lot of paranormal conventions and lectures, and he and a friend of mine who they're best friends, they have a podcast called "What's Up Weirdo," and he's really big into the paranormal space, and he's world renowned. Um, he always greets everybody in his lectures. The first thing he always says is, "What's up, weirdos?" Because the word "weird" is actually a compliment. If you do some research on it, and if you talk to him, he explains the whole etymology behind the word "weird" and stuff like that, and the history of it. So I like when people say I'm weird or call me a weirdo because I give them a thumbs up and I tell, "Oh, thanks, that's cool." But yeah, we should keep the web weird, keep it funky, the old days. I actually wanted to start writing a conference talk. I have the title for it, but it was going to be a conference talk on the old school web from like '96, and like just showing all the cool stuff that we used to be able to do back in the day, showing some of the stuff we still can do even though stuff's deprecated. Like Marquee still works even though it's deprecated, which is cool. But Blink isn't a thing anymore, and you can't even use it. You might be able to use it in one browser, but I don't think you can use it across the browsers. But like Marquee still works. I have a code pen that shows Marquee working. It was so much fun, right? So one day we'll get the old web back. I hope.
Yeah, yeah. This has been an amazing conversation. It's gone all over the show, but it's been lovely. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day to have a conversation with me. In closing, you mentioned that you do fishing and things like that. I saw on your Twitter in the header you seem to also enjoy paintball. So what is it about? Like those are two very different things. Like paintball, fishing. Fishing is more like a relaxing zen kind of thing, and paintball seems the opposite. Like, is it that attracts you to it, or is there actually a through line that I'm missing?
Ooh, so I guess yes, everything, right? I was diagnosed with ADHD as a kid, and I have other mental health issues, anxiety issues, obsessive compulsive disorder. But I think I have undiagnosed adult ADHD, and so like I do a lot of things all the time, right? Like I do so many things, and I'll have a hobby here and a hobby there, and I'll pick up a hobby from years ago. But when I was growing up in my teens, I used to paintball with friends. So we used to go to the paintball field and play all the time. And then I stopped playing for a while because back issues and knee problems, and you got to do a lot of running and diving and kneeling when you're in the paintball field. Even if you're playing woods ball, I don't play woods ball. I play on an air bunker field, on 3 or 4 different teams all around the country and in Ontario, Canada. I play for a team. Um, but it's fast paced and I love it. And I played as when I was younger. So I started playing again years ago, and I play on a national level now for the NXL on a team, which is the National X-Ball League. So that's fun. I was just played in Vegas a few weeks back. A month ago, I played in Vegas for the first event for the NXL. I'll be in Dallas in 2 weeks for the second NXL event. At the end of the month, I'll be in Canada for the first event for the Ontario Paintball League. Got a couple more events for some other teams I'm on here in Michigan, as well as my own team, Motor City Horsepower. So I do that, and then I grew up fishing as a little kid, and I always wanted to fish in fishing tournaments. So last year was I made my breakthrough debut as a co-angler. So that's fishing from the back of the boat on somebody else's boat. You have an angler and a co-angler, depending on the fishing series that you're fishing, the event series. So I started doing that here in Michigan for the Phoenix, the Major League Fishing Phoenix BFL. BFL stands for Bass Fishing League, which is just one event series for the MLF. And then you have the Bassmasters. I'm in a Bassmasters club locally, so we fish local tournaments, put our own tournaments on. So yeah, I do that now. Hopefully I'll get a bass boat at the end of the summer, and I can start, because I don't have a boat, right? So if I'm not on somebody's boat, I'm fishing from the shore, and fishing from shore sucks. Like, it's not fun. But I have a fishing YouTube channel called Off the Hook, Off the Hook Detroit, where I do fishing videos and product tutorials, or not product tutorials, but like product reviews and unboxings and stuff like that. So that's really fun. What else? So yeah, I mean, I compete in paintball. I compete in bass fishing. I do the paranormal stuff. I ride dirt bikes. Uh, what else? I go to comic cons. I go to horror cons. I travel the world as a developer advocate. Yeah, I do a lot of shit. So I just like staying busy. Like, I like keeping on the go, because if I sit for too long, then my
Hmm.
mind will start messing with me, and I'll start
Hmm.
thinking too much about things. And I just need to keep going. I need to keep going and being on the move and doing things. And that might be a product of ADHD. That might be a product of, I like the fast paced stuff, but I also like the slow stuff when it comes to fishing. But I'm also fishing when I'm in competition. I'm fishing for money too. So like, I got to hustle while I'm fishing too. Like, if I don't keep the line in the water, I'm not catching fish. And the more fish I catch, the higher amount of fish I catch and weight, the higher I go up in standings, and I could walk away with a check. So, but yeah, that's my life in a nutshell. And I play hockey too, so ice hockey.
Whoa, dude.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so that's fun.
yeah. You're busy. That's for sure. Keeping
A
busy.
little bit.
I Yeah, I hear you about the staying busy though, because otherwise you have too much time to think, and that's not a good thing. I hear you. I have very much in the same boat there. Well, again, thanks, Chris. This has been amazing. In closing, how can people find and support you?
Yeah. Oh, let's see here. If you are a conference goer, I will be speaking at KCDC in June. It's the Kansas City Developer Conference in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm doing a workshop, an accessibility workshop on Wednesday. The week of, I'm doing an accessibility workshop on Wednesday. And then Thursday, I got to fly home Friday for a fishing tournament Saturday. So I can't stay the whole week. So I'll be in Kansas City that week in June. I think it's June 26, 27, 28, or 27, 28, 29. But if you go to kcdc.info, you'll be able to get all the information. The agenda was just put out. And I'm doing a talk. I'm doing the workshop. I'm doing a talk that week as well at KCDC on using Lighthouse and all the awesomeness that Lighthouse provides in Chrome. I haven't done that talk in a long time, so that's got to be revamped. I got to revamp the accessibility workshop. And then the day before, I'm speaking at the KC.net meetup, and I'm doing a talk on building accessible forms with Razor. And Razor is the syntax that you can use inside C# to build out, HTML essentially. So it's C#.netty stuff, but it's Razor is like the HTML that's inside a C# project. So I'm showing how to build an accessible form using Razor, and then I'm going to probably deploy all this stuff from all these talks to App Platform and DO. So if you don't use DO and you want to know more about it, and you're in Kansas City that week, stop by, buy a ticket to KCDC, or go to the meetup, and yeah, just you can support me like that. Talk cool about me on Twitter and tag DO. You can hit me up on Twitter. I'm an open book. DM me. I'm at Salt and Burnham, SaltNBurnem. If you're a Supernatural fan, you'll understand the reference to Salt and Burnham. Yeah, I love Salt. I love Supernatural. I'm a big Supernatural fan, Buffy fan, Stranger Things, Charmed, all that stuff.
Ooh,
So yeah. So yeah, that's the best way to support and get a hold of me. Twitter is where you're going to find me. So
nice. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Chris. This has been lovely. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day. And yeah, thanks for all the work you do.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Let's do it again.
Thank you for listening to the Mechanical Ink. podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Have something to add? Continue the conversation on GitHub and join the community on Slack. Until the next one, keep all the things open.